Hi, my name is Laura Nelkin. I'm a knitwear designer. I live in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, and I am excited to teach you how to knit with thrums. I bet some of you are familiar with the technique of thrumming, and some of you might never have heard of it before. It is a technique that originates from Labrador and Newfoundland, and it is when knitters took short pieces of fleece and incorporated them into their knitting to create knitting that was insulated. This is a headband that I designed called Thrumola, and it has thrums on the inside of the fabric. So you can see that these little heart-shaped stitches right here on the outside are those short pieces of fleece. So in this quick video, I'm going to show you how to do that. The first thing that you'll need to do for thrumming is have some fleece on hand. It's really important if you are using fleece that this fleece is not superwash. Make sure that it is non-superwash. You want your thrums to felt over time and kind of become part of the fabric of your knit. And if you work with a superwash fleece, they will not felt. And I actually, the first pair of mittens I ever made with thrumming was with superwash fleece, and they just kind of disintegrated over time. So don't make the mistake I made. The fleece that I have that I'm going to show you how to thrum with today is from Malabrigo, and it's called Nube. And I used it in my January 2026 Lola's Choice kit, Thrumola. So Nube is a non-superwash, 100% merino wool. It is super soft and yummy. If you have some fleece on hand, like that you see at a local farmer's market or at a fiber festival, even if you have some like Pluto Lopi, you can use that, or any other like unspun roving or Lopi style yarn that you have. There's many things that you can make thrums out of. I'm going to show you how to do that with this length of Nube. So you will see that this piece of robing is quite thick. You want to end up with a thrum that is similar to the thickness of your yarn. They will compress a little bit, so it's okay if they're a little bit bigger, but there's no way I could make a thrum out of this piece of fleece. So the first thing that I'm going to do, you can kind of do this two ways. You can tear off a little bit, or you can take your whole piece of roving, and this is just so satisfying to rip the whole piece of roving in half. And then you can go ahead and then just take like a shorter kind of pencil, almost like one would call this like a pencil roving off of there. If you take a piece off and you think it's still too thick, you can even take a little bit off of there and make it thinner. If you got a Lola's Choice kit, I gave you plenty of fleece so you can play around and your hands will slowly get used to like what is the right thickness for the yarn that you're using. So I'm just going to show you with this piece right here. Once you have a piece, I'm going to call that a little thick. I'm going to take a little bit off just to show you what that's like. Once you have a piece that's about the thickness that you like, you want to hold your fingers about 6 inches apart from each other. Let's see if that's about 6 inches. And then you want to just kind of pull. The staple length of this fiber is about 4 inches. And that one came out maybe a little bit short, but we can make it work there. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to fold the two ends in half towards the center. And then I am just kind of going to rub that center right there in between my fingers to join the two ends together. And there I've got a little thrum. You can see that thrum's ending up being a little bit shorter than the other ones I have. So if I have my hands maybe a little bit farther apart right there, I've got a piece of fleece that's just a little bit bigger. And now I'm going to take that and I'm going to fold right there and I'm going to fold right there. And then I am going to bring them together and watch. This is funny because of course I'm doing it for you. This one came out a little bigger than the other ones. So you'll start to get used to what, let's do this with this one. This is a good example. If I finish that one and I'm like, you are too big, I can just go ahead and pull a little bit of fleece off the end there, making him a little shorter, little bit more like what I want, and then folding into the middle again. So you've got some good flexibility to make sure that they end up being about the size that you want. When you're done, let's see what you should have when you're done here. You should have something that's about 3 inches long when you're done, give or take. Doesn't matter so much. Again, this is on the inside of your knitting. So once you have your thrums made, I like to actually make all of my thrums for a project, and sometimes I even make a few more than the project calls for, just in case there's one where I'm like, I could do better than you. Um, lets you be a little bit picky. I like to make them all ahead of time so I can just get into my knitting and grab them from a bowl or a bag or something. Some people like to make just some at a time. That is completely up to you. But when you're ready, the next thing we're going to do is show you how to work with that thrum. All right, I have a little mini version of the Thrumola headband on my needles underneath the camera. The yarn that I use, the Lamola for Thrumola, was just too fuzzy to show you the technique with. It was like impossible to see what was happening with the stitches. So the first thing that I want to do when I go to work a stitch with a thrum is when your pattern says thrum, you want to have your yarn kind of off to the right and out of the way. If you are an English knitter or a knitter who holds your yarn in your right hand when you knit, your yarn is already going to be over there. If you are a continental knitter like I am, the first thing you want to kind of do is make sure your yarn is out of the way. And now what you want to do is take your needle tip and go into the second stitch underneath the needle. So don't go into the stitch that is on the needle right there, but go one stitch under, stick your needle through, grab a thrum and place it over your needle, just like that, and then pull that thrum through onto your right hand needle. And then take your yarn and make sure it's coming over the thrum right there and knit the stitch on the needle. The final step to making that thrum is to go ahead and pick up that thrum and bring it over the stitch. And there you have your first little heart-shaped thrum on your work. If we flip that over to the back, you really get an idea of what that looks like on the back of the work. I'm going to show this to you one more time because it's really, really fun and I'm not done with this tutorial. So when I get up to the stitch that calls for a thrum, I want to leave my yarn to the right. I'm going to go ahead and take my needle, put it into the stitch, one stitch underneath the stitch on your left hand needle, put your thrum over your needle and pop it through, and then go ahead and knit the stitch on the needle. And finally, you can take that thrum and pull it up and over. If you're working with a thrum that is a little bit short, you might find then when you lift it to come up and over that you start to pull the end out a little bit. And it's really easy to go to the back of your work and kind of snug up your thrums a little bit if you need to and keep that end from pulling out. So feel free to do that as you're working if you find that they're popping out a little bit and you want to neaten them up. That's all I have to show you about thrumming. The biggest thing I could tell you, the biggest mistake you could make is to work with non-superwash wool. I really want to do a shout out to my friend Mika from Salt and Stone Knits, who originally taught me how to I gotta stop that. How to thrum in 2021. I believe I took a class with her online. And then last winter, I also took another class on thrumming mitts from Barb at Rabbit Row Yarns. That was really fun. And it reminded me that I always wanted to do a design with thrums. And since there were so many mittens out there, I'm so happy to have come up with this headband concept. I hope you have a great time knitting with thrums. Please do ask me questions below. I am happy to answer them. Happy knitting.